Now he has turned himself in after being indicted by the grand jury. Stephen Roberts, ABC News political analyst. This, Stephen Roberts, we don't want to oversell it. We don't want to undersell it. But just over an hour ago, the former campaign manager of Donald Trump's campaign being arrested is kind of a big story.
It is a big story, but let's be careful. As you say, we've got to be very careful and precise here. We don't know what's in the indictment yet, McGraw. My best guess is that the indictment of Manafort really is not directly related to the White House. Manafort has a long history of shady financial dealings with a lot of foreign clients that he's worked for years, Ukraine and others. And the fact that his business associate, Rick Gates, has also been indicted tells me what's most likely here is that he's been indicted for financial crimes that aren't related to the White House. But this is the way investigations work. You indict someone like Manafort and Gates, you bring them in as they're being brought into the prosecutors this morning, and then they sit down with them and say, okay, tell us what you know about Donald Trump and Russia and the White House. So the indictment itself is not the issue. The real question is whether the prosecutors can use that as leverage with Manafort and Gates to get them to talk about issues more directly related to the White House. As you pointed out, Manafort was a campaign manager for months. He sat in on a lot of very important meetings.
All right, so explain, Stephen Roberts, how this works, because the White House is in the middle of DACA, they're in the middle of tax cuts, they're in the middle of all these other things. How does the campaign manager being arrested and being indicted affect the day-to-day ongoings of the White House?
Well, after some fits and starts, they have tried to isolate the issues. They've hired several very good Washington lawyers to try to handle these problems and separate it from the political and legislative battles they're facing, particularly, of course, tax reform, which is the huge issue facing them from a legislative point of view. But in the end, you can't separate them entirely. The news is going to be totally filled for the next couple of days with the kind of speculation and reports about this indictment, and any attempt by Trump to focus on the economy, focus on tax reform is going to be muted and overshadowed. And that's certainly in the short run going to be a political problem. You know, we have a new poll out, there's a new Wall Street Journal poll out this morning, which points out that Trump's favorable rating is only 38%, the lowest it's ever been in this poll. But on the economy, he has a favorable rating, been 2 quarters of 3% growth. He wants to talk about the economy. This makes it harder.
Yeah. Going forward, how does this affect the people in the White House? We hear they don't talk. They look at everybody suspicious because who knows what, who's talking about who. So this sort of affects, as you say, everybody and everything in Washington, D.C.?
It does, even though they try to compartmentalize it. You can't completely. Among other things, there are a lot of people in the White House who have to hire their own lawyers, often at enormous expense. This happened during the Clinton administration, where a lot of people in the Clinton administration totally distracted by the Monica Lewinsky probe and the special prosecutor, and also wound up costing a lot of money, because when you got to hire high-priced lawyers, if you are potentially vulnerable, you know, these people are not making big corporate salaries, you know, and so there are a lot of side effects, and people got suspicious of each other. Who knows, you know, who's being called in? Who knows who's talking? Who knows what? All of those questions are definitely on the minds of people, and so no matter how hard you struggle to compartmentalize, no matter how hard you struggle to keep your priorities straight, something like this distracts everything.
A lot of watchers of this, experts say, you go for the small fish first and you work your way up. Paul Manafort's a pretty big fish.
Yes, but not. He's a pretty big fish, but let's remember, he was only campaign manager for about 4 months. As I say, my best guess is if and when we see this indictment, it's going to have very little to do with his service as Trump's campaign manager. It's going to have to do with his other financial dealings, which have been very complicated and very kind of shady for many years. But the real question is leverage. The real question is, in 4 months, the meetings he sat in on, the things he heard, the strategy he helped plan, There were meetings that he sat. We know that he sat in on one key meeting where an emissary from Russia promised to provide dirt on Hillary Clinton. That famous meeting. We know he was in that room. What other meetings was he in on? What else can he say to prosecutors on this key question of, did the Trump campaign have any role in what we know to be a very aggressive Russian campaign to meddle in the election?
Stephen,
what was the connection there, if at all?
Stephen Roberts, great job as always. Thanks for reading the tea leaves for us. 7:57.